That's good. That's Sophia. Hi, thanks. Okay, we'll make a start. Okay. Yeah, so what do you call it? I suppose human sexuality in healthcare and how we work with people, yeah, how we relate with people on the basis of their needs and things like that. We are in the main, yeah, it's not a big problem, but of course, in recent years, yeah, sexuality has been almost weaponized. You know? So we have a very complex set of situations when we discuss human sexuality. Yeah. Okay. I mean, to the point, for instance, where government ministers cannot say what a female is, you know, cannot define what a female is, you know, and it's just a kind of a strange period we are going through. Hopefully, there'll be some stuff, things will settle down, and there'll be some pushback as well. But certainly, what's the name of the author again? Harry Potter. Harry Potter. What's the name? You know who I mean. Yeah, yeah. And what do you call it? She got a lot of flack. Yeah, for defining what a woman should be. Yeah. Okay. But we'll explore that. But you have to be aware. Yeah, what's happening not only within our own culture, our own context, but also how what's happening elsewhere is having a bearing on how we view uh, sex, role, and gender and stuff like that. Okay, let me just go through the what do you call it, some of the things in the slide here. Where's my slide share? Um, okay, I hope you all have got the slide. Yeah, you have got this. Okay, we look at some of the early studies in human sexuality, the people, because it was an area which had to be sort of, as a society, people have to agree that it is reasonable and to study and to discuss and stuff like that. But of course, when they did it in the early days, especially around the late 1800s, early 1900s, where most of the work was done, yeah, the culture was different, the context was very different, you know, and they were really creating a new area of fact study, therapy, and stuff like that. You know. We'll look at the distinction between sex, gender, sexual orientation, the basics you need to know, review common and alternative sexual behaviors, and phrase how pleasure, sexual behaviors, and consent are intertwined. But the important thing is you discuss. Um, like they say, you know, certainly sex kind of is something that is around us. Yeah, people say it makes the world go round. Uh, Babies born, children giggle, adults have babies and things like that. Yeah, it is addressed in books of, you know, in different cultures, in religions, and it infiltrates every part. Yeah, infiltrates every part of society. It influences the way we dress, joke, and talk. Yeah. Okay. In many ways, sex defines who we are. It is important. Yeah. And people like Rembrandt, even clean and sex, yeah, are the four drives he was talking about. Okay, but the important thing is that it is something that people started to view as something to study, yeah, even by the, you know, sort of towards the end of the 1800s. Yeah, physicians were looking at it. there wasn't the psychologist, so to speak, to look at it, but certainly people who were involved in health at that time, they were already starting to pay attention to it. Yeah. People like Havelock Ellis, for instance, he used case study method to research uh, as an investigative tool, yeah, to investigate sex. He examined diverse topics, yeah, within sexuality, including arousal and things like masturbation and things like that. They were unknown or unheard of at the time, but people were starting to study these things, yeah, as part of human behavior. And of course, he published his findings in a 7-volume set of books titled, Studies in Psychology of Sex. Yeah. He was basically making it as an academic topic to focus on. Yeah. Among his most noteworthy finding is the transgender people are distinct from homosexual people. Yeah, it's interesting. Even at that time, he was already distinguishing these things, yeah, and making a distinction between transgender and homosexual. Yeah. And this study led him to be an advocate of equal rights for women and comprehensive human sexuality education in public school. So some of the stuff that the early studies, brought about, yeah, was good. Yeah, in some ways it was good, but what's happening now in some education settings is something quite different. Anyway, Alfred Kinsey was another important name in the study of sexual behavior and stuff like that. Yeah, he used interviews to research human sexual behavior and responses. Yeah, although controversial, society was intrigued with findings that showed men and women were more alike in their sexual instincts and preferences than previously thought, and their sexual behaviors were shaped by social and cultural forces. Because Kinsey, for instance, at that time was already getting popular in the press. Yeah. So his work will be discussed in the press. Yeah. And we're talking about the 50s and of course 60s. Yeah. 60s was an amazing period of time. Though I wasn't, what do you call it, in work at that time, but we got the downwind, if you like, from what happened in the 60s in the academic side of things, yeah, in the 70s as well. So I had some of the sense of what it was like. Yeah. Kinsey Institute used interviews to collect data about human sexual practices, including intercourse, anal and oral sex, masturbation, just about anything that humans engaged in. And they were prepared to study. Yeah, and they documented their findings. Concluded that it's interesting, it's a class thing. Those in the lower socioeconomic class are more permissive and in their sexual behavior. Yeah, okay. But presumably people in the upper classes didn't engage in it in the same way. The other two, for William Masters and Virginia Johnson, yeah, they were also quite influential. Again, yeah, they used direct observation to examine arousal responses. Yeah, and their primary contribution has been to help define sexuality as healthy human trait and the experience of great pleasure and deep intimacy during sex rather than just to procreate is a socially acceptable goal. These studies were influencing perceptions and how people discussed the discourse in the general media. Yeah. Okay, it was becoming more acceptable as part of, to discuss it as part of the relationship. They focused on sexual functioning, sexual problems, yeah, therapeutic interventions. So in a sense, because they thought of it as important in intimate relationship, and it was an acceptable kind of goal, yeah, in intimate relationship. So when it's not there, we could help people to have a better, satisfying kind of relationship in that way. Yeah. findings were published just prior to the sexual revolution in the 60s. Yeah. So it was quite a huge impact. Yeah. Their studies did. Yeah, those three studies had a major influence really in what happened in the 60s. Now, sex, gender, and sexual orientation. I mean, I remember, for instance, in the days when I used to fill application forms, it used to say sex, male or female. You know, now they don't. Yeah, they put gender and they give you a range of options. Yeah, okay. But it's common for us to use the term sex and gender interchangeably. Yeah. Okay. However, in modern usage, these terms are distinct from one another. Yeah. Sex describes means of biological reproduction, yeah, including sex includes sexual organs such as ovaries, defining what it is to be a female, or testes, yeah, defining what it is to be a male. Yeah, okay. Those are when we use the word sex. Yeah, that's what we mean. Yeah. It's about your biological sex. Gender describes. Remember, we're looking at the gender identity, role, and things like that. So gender describes the psychological and sociological representation of biological sex, which is gender identity and gender role. At an early age, we begin learning cultural norms for what is considered masculine and feminine. Yeah, how we are presented, yeah, in terms of our clothes, how we relate, and all that has a gender dimension to it, which is gender role. And gender identity is, when people go through the psychological stages and they come to view themselves as what gender they are. Usually it will match their biological sex, but not always. Gender identity doesn't always do that. Now, the sexual orientation, sex and gender are important aspects of a person's identity. However, they do not tell us about a person's sexual orientation. Yeah. Okay. They don't actually say what their sexual orientation is. But sometimes in our current context, I think they do more so. Yeah. Not before. Yeah. Okay. In the current context, the gender as they express themselves. Yeah. We'll talk about that in a moment. Gives us a better indication about the sexual orientation, but it doesn't always say so. So sexual orientation refers to a person's sexual attraction to others, yeah, what they're attracted, yeah, to. Yeah. Within the context of sexual orientation, sexual attraction refers to a person's capacity to arouse the sexual interest of another, or conversely, the sexual interest one person feels towards another. Yeah. Okay, that is sexual orientation. It is our capacity, yeah, to do to ourselves and to others. Yeah. Now, just as biological sex varies in a sense, yeah, more widely than commonly thought, so too does gender. Yeah. Okay. Now, cisgender, simply individuals' gender identities correspond with their birth sex, the biological, if you like. Yeah. Whereas transgender individuals' gender identities do not correspond with their birth sexes. Yeah. Okay. So that they don't always correspond with their biology. Okay. Because gender is so deeply ingrained culturally, rates of transgender individuals vary widely around the world. Now, you might be interested. This is one table Malaysians seem to be doing very well on. Yeah, look at that. Yeah, per 100,000 people. Yeah. Malaysia has 1,333, while the States has only 476. Yeah, even Thailand has only 330. So we are way ahead. Yeah, and yet somehow we don't sense that. but there is an undercurrent because my most a good proportion of people I work with, yeah, they have issues in terms of their sexual identity, orientation, or their what they call a transition, as they say. Yeah. Okay. So the Malaysia, we have an issue, but whether it's a problem, we don't know. Yeah. Don't know in the sense that we don't have that facility to discuss these things and provide support or whatever. Yeah. But it's all there, brushed, kept out of view. Yeah. Our media doesn't handle it, and our professionals don't discuss it. Yeah. Although incidence rates of transgender individuals differ significantly between cultures, transgender, this is TGF, transgender females whose birth sex was male are by far the most frequent types of transgender individuals worldwide. Yeah, that is males wanting to be females, if you like, in terms of their gender. Yeah. Certainly, Luboski, this is 2013, yeah, and then they looked at around 18 countries or so. 16 of them had higher rates of transgender females than transgender males. Yeah, that is females wanting to be males, yeah, whose birth sex was female. That is, yeah. And the 18 countries TGF to TGN ratio was about 3 to 1. Okay, so you can see the trend. But yeah, isn't it interesting how certainly in not so much in Europe, more so in the States, where you have transgender females participating in athletic events, sports events, you know, and or swimming events, yeah, and they obviously are going to do better than the biological females, yeah, which is they're allowing that, but it's not settled yet. But I find it strange, that that is allowed, when they are physically made. You know. The TGFs have diverse level of androgyny, yeah, having both feminine, yeah, and masculine characteristics. For example, 5% of Samoan population are EGFs, yeah, referred to as Fa'afafin, yeah, who range in androgyny from mostly masculine to mostly feminine. Yeah. Of course, in places like India, Nepal, Bangladesh, I believe they referred to them as hijras, yeah, recognized by their government as a third gender. And those of you from India in the group, you can say something about this. I believe they are treated as a third gender and range in androgyny from only having a few masculine characteristics to be entirely feminine. Uh, and of course, in Mexico, in different parts of the world, they how feminine they are, it depends, yeah, in the TGX anyway. An image of a hijra dancer in Nepal, yeah. And in Philippines, yeah, and you will see the women, and you will never recognize, you will not recognize them. There's no male features in there. Yeah. In this person, you can see some male features, but some, no, you don't get. They are very feminine in their look. Okay, gender identity and gender dysphoria. Yeah. Most children with androgen insensitivity syndrome, yeah, continue to feel they are the gender they grew up with. Yeah. As a result, the person has some of the physical traits of a woman, but the genetic makeup of a man. Yeah. Okay. So that it's because of the androgen insensitivity. Yeah. they are feminine, yeah, but the genetic makeup is of a male. Yeah. In a few cases, older children and adults with AIS feel their gender identity does not match the gender they have been raised. Yeah. This is known as gender dysphoria. Yeah. Okay. People with gender dysphoria often have a desire, yeah, to live as a member of the opposite sex or as non-binary. Yeah. Okay. They may want treatment to make their physical appearance more consistent with their gender identity or how they choose to identify. Okay. Uh, any questions, folks? Any questions? Anything you want to ask or share? Those of you from India, and any observation you want to make? No? Any thoughts? Any questions? I'm sure you have plenty of issues that you want to talk about. No. We have had, I suppose, I personally have worked, and even in the 70s, for instance, we used to treat people, yeah, for their problems, if you like. Yeah. And even people who are homosexuals were actively treated until about mid 70s. Yeah. Okay. And the important thing is culture, society changes. Yeah. It is not appropriate to treat people, yeah, at the present moment. Yeah, we don't. But of course, the whole issue of transgender or the gender transition kind of questions they raise, we have to revisit these things again. Yeah. But there is also, I think, I feel personally that there are people who could be helped, people who could be made a lot more comfortable in their lives and stuff like that, and people who should be allowed to be the way they are or they want to be. I've got no problem. And I also don't have problem with people, if you like, what they do behind closed doors. I don't really care. Yeah. But I do have problem when people demand and insist that we all should, yeah, rethink everything, and we cannot, like for instance, a maternity unit. We don't call, or there was demand even in the UK and the Czechs. Yeah, the demand was that these are birthing units. You cannot imply that this is feminine, yeah, okay, or that we should change, instead of calling people mothers, we have to call them differently, to be inclusive of a small group of people, which doesn't make sense. But of course, we shouldn't victimize or make people feel somehow not valued. But that is not the point. Yeah. The point is that there is, I think, pressure from very small groups of people to redefine and change how we view families, how we view, how we bring up children and stuff like that. Yeah. I think there is a fine line, and societies have to, um, articulate, And I think in recent months, I've noticed the Russians are very clear in how they are articulating, as opposed to how Europe and US has gone, and the Russians are defining it more clearly how they will handle it and manage it. So there's a lot of pushback there, but they don't want to victimize people. That cannot be acceptable. Yeah, people should not feel victimized for their sexual orientation. But what the Russians are saying is that no, we don't need to go promoting in classrooms. You don't have to have a drag queen come to your, primary school and read children and stuff like that. Yeah, to make them comfortable with it. Okay. Anyway, listen, folks. Any questions? Anything you want to ask or discuss?
But doesn't that go against some countries? Let's take, for instance, Malaysia. So some countries, they are based on each religion, right? So for Malaysia, it's Islam. So I can understand why they would be against the LGBTQ community and everything. Wouldn't that make it even increase the pressure? Because it's not wrong that you want to be a gay, lesbian, or a transgender person, but it sometimes there are some instances where we have to think about where we are and how the environment is. It's not wrong to change society, because right now everybody is learning what autonomy is and they're trying to get their own rights, you know?
Yeah. Okay. No, I understand what you're saying, but as a society, say for instance, yeah, we are a Muslim country. It's a Muslim, majority country, and yet our LGBTQ community is biggest in the world almost. Yeah, and I'm not confident that it is the case. Yeah, but the indications are that it's quite a large group. You know. But that means, as a society, at some point, yeah, they have to come to terms with it, yeah, and make these people, they are Malaysians, yeah, feel part of that society. You know, how the adjustments are done. But I personally, like I was saying earlier, say it must be done without making people feel as though they are discriminated against or victimized. Yeah. I was only was it a week ago? Yeah, in the British Airways, actually made it their policy that male pilots and stewardess and the stewards and all that, they can wear whatever they want. Yeah, they can wear makeup, they can wear nail varnish, put on a dress or whatever, high heels. And that was a policy statement by British Airways. Yeah. Okay. Now, I'm not saying that's a good idea, yeah, but that's what they were doing. Yeah. And the NHS in England, for instance, produced a policy and a document to say, look, these are the different, gender identities. And there is about, I think, 70 or 80. And I've seen documents, what they call it, that's got about 150. You know. So there is considerable, yeah, debate to be had. Yeah. It's just that some societies are attending to it, addressing it, yeah, but some are not even discussing it. Yeah. That's the difficulty. Yeah. Okay. But where we draw the line, I support the Russians. Yeah. They're very good because they seem to have said, look, our family values, our traditions, our culture, that remains. You don't, ask us to redefine those, but you have a space. Yeah. But you don't have a right to promote, yeah, the what do you call it, different ideas about gender identities in classrooms and stuff like that. Yeah, they stop the promotion. Yeah. You don't have a right to have, if you like, a gender, what do you call it, pride parade or whatever, yeah, on the streets. You can't shove it up people's faces, but you have space to do it. So in some ways, they have actually thought about it and addressed it. Yeah. But not everybody is doing it. In some societies, it's just being imposed. Yeah. You cannot do this. This is what you do in the name of inclusion, which is not right either. Yeah. But people must have some kind of space to talk, discuss, and come to a sort of reasonable kind of approach so that the individuals concerned don't feel, you know, discriminated against. Now, the other thing that I am concerned also about is the cover they use. Yeah, I think that there are forces that use the LGBTQ plus plus plus, to cover things that are very perverse and shouldn't be allowed, like pedophilia and whatnot. Yeah.
Yes, yes.
Sorry, say that again.
Yes, yes. Yeah, I understood.
Yeah, and I think we should be aware. But if we don't talk, if we don't engage, yeah, and discuss, we will let that slide, yeah, and we shouldn't, you know? And there's a big problem there, yeah. So I think personally, it, for some people it's a cover, and when government funds are going for, it, yeah, I mean, like for instance in UK, there is an organization called Stonewall, yeah, they've been going for a long time, funded by government, yeah, and they train people and they, you know. They're activists basically. They organize all sorts of training and what you call promotion and stuff like that. But the powerful people in government are, or establishment, if you like, not always government, they promote it because it gives them cover. Yeah. So now you cannot attack them because you're being, you know, politically, you know, not correct in your attitude. Yeah. Okay. So I think that there is a risk that it is a cover value, yeah, for some people, but it is not to uh, say that there are many people who can be helped and genuinely, you know, supported, yeah, and affirmed in the way they want to live their life, and that should be allowed. That's why I was interested to hear because in Indian societies, yeah, in India, it's always been there, my understanding, you know, and they are included in some way, you know, and they have a role, and they are not discriminated, and that's what I think. I don't know. That's what I was interested to hear from some of you who are from India.
Well, doctor, talking about India and transgenders and LGBTQ, there has been a law that has been passed, but still, because of the society, there are still stigmas related to them. It's not like they aren't discriminated. Yes, people like, especially from this community, are largely discriminated in India, which obviously I don't want. But yeah, I believe it's how the society is right now, and that's unfortunate.
Yeah, yeah. Um,
Yeah, and I would like to add on that. So in India, it depends on the region, to be honest, but in most places they're discriminated to some extent, and in most places they do have some disadvantages compared to the normal population. But the government has made some efforts, like now in South India, like they're allowed to have hold posts, they're allowed to be in the government and stuff like that.
mm.
I mean, adding to that as well, India, because it follows Hindu, it's a democratic country, obviously, but the major religion in India is Hinduism, and LGBTQ and transgenders have been a part of Hinduism for thousands of years. But still, again, I would say it's the society and their mentality of how they want to go about it. And talking about the government, yes, they have made laws, but the thing is, even in the healthcare system, they like doctors, even nowadays, you know, try to not treat the transgender patients, or they are very stigmatized about it.
Yeah,
So, like recently, I guess in Telangana, that's a state in India, or Kerala, I'm not sure, only like there are many transgender doctors or medical students, but out of them only a few make it. So like recently there was only one or two transgender doctors that were offered a post as a medical officer in the hospital. Rest are still, their voices are not heard. They are, I don't know what to say, it's just very unfortunate, because they are like humans after all. We can't control our emotions, it's based on hormones.
yeah.
So it's very unfortunate how people still feel that they are a stigma to the society.
That's right. It's a society's reaction. But the interesting thing that you know, both of you, you know, thank you for sharing that, because Indian culture has created space for them for a long, long time. And yet we are saying, yeah, or I think I'm hearing, there is a lot of still discrimination against.
Yes, obviously, it's ironic, doctor, because, like, as I mentioned, it has been prevalent in Hinduism. We have transgender gods, we
Yeah,
have that. So it's very ironic that even after people blindly and following Hinduism without knowing the core principles,
yeah,
like, they still are very discriminative towards these people.
yeah.
Like, you pray to them, but you can't give them equal rights. How does it make sense?
And in a way, what you're saying also is that the people who were our forefathers who seem to be a lot more enlightened. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that's true. True.
Yeah. But I think it is getting a balance, getting what you call a, I'm very reluctant to go whole hog and say, look, this is what we should do to make them inclusive and whatever. But I know that there is another dimension to it that we should be careful, that we should be mindful of, uh, which is basically, whether you look at the vaccine, whether you look at food insecurity, whether you look at transgender issues and stuff like that, the agenda of depopulation, yeah, is always there. Yeah. And the same people, I believe, are behind some of the promotion. Yeah. Okay. Now, what lovely way to undermine society. Yeah. To disrupt what a family needs. Yeah. How you should live, and pleasure is just it's your personal private thing, and that's all that matters. Yeah. Society has to make these judgments. Yeah. Okay. To me, I find that the group of people, yeah, who are pushing, yeah, the agenda, I don't trust them. Yeah. I think the societies should decide, different countries, different societies should find ways of accommodating and, adjusting and creating space so that the transgender folks can also have a satisfying, fulfilling life in that society, not to be dictated by forces from outside. Yeah. They have a different agenda. Yeah. When they are promoting transgender stuff, I also see undermining of culture, societies, and it might be okay for people in California or Hollywood, wherever they are. Yeah, it's their problem. Yeah, but it's not reasonable for them to say we have to accept this. Yeah. I don't go along with that. I think that dialogue, that discourse must be had by ourselves. Yeah. Like you said, we have a longer tradition. Yeah. Than those folks, yeah, in dealing with these things. And we should actually be leading and handling this in a way that it is not undermining our society. Yeah, okay? But the way that I see it being pushed in the last few years, yeah, is that it is designed to sabotage. Yeah. Uh, and the fundings that I've seen, the sources of funding, they are all about sabotaging other societies, or they are weaponizing it to beat, yeah, another government somewhere else or whatever. Yeah. And those things need to be avoided, because once it becomes a problem like that, then we get confused and we don't know. Some of your sentiments that I've heard is good, and we should really retain those sentiments and work with those folks who are, wanting to live their lives in the way that they want, without undermining the wider society. Any other thoughts? Any other folks who want to add to what we have been saying? Anybody else? What about the locals? What about the locals? I mean, do you and I mean, I know in my role, my work, I see many, but do you guys, engage with the transgender folks? No, Goka?
Sorry, sir, nothing to add from me for this.
Okay. Okay. But no, I think also it is the lack of engaging with the thoughts, the ideas. Yeah. You have to engage. You're going to be healthcare professionals. Yeah. You have to work through these things for yourself so that you can be in the presence of another person. Yeah. Comfortably. Yeah. Without, avoiding, yeah, or engendering emotions which are going to get in the way. Yeah. Okay, look, we can pick it up and discuss when you do your tutorial. Yeah. Okay. No, I believe we have another session on Thursday. Yeah. Are we doing it online or are we doing it face to face?
I believe that one will be face to face, sir, because the rest of our sessions on that day are face to face as well.
Okay. Okay. Good. Good. Okay. So, I mean, unless you got some other question, something else you want to raise and discuss, I'm happy to leave things there for now. Yeah. And catch up with you on Thursday. Yeah. I think Thursday you'll be looking at what do you call motivation and motivational interviewing. Yeah. And that is another topic that is very important. You need to be very comfortable with in terms of the responding to questions and things like that. Anyway, we'll catch up with you on Thursday. Yeah. Thanks very much. Have a good day. Yeah. Speak to you soon. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Bye bye. Bye bye.